The most powerful weapon ever used in war doesn't explode. It doesn't pierce armor. It has never fired a single bullet. And it has won more battles than any gun in history. Because here's a secret every great commander has known for 3,000 years. You don't actually win a war by killing the enemy. You win it the moment the enemy stops wanting to fight. A soldier who drops his rifle and walks home is worth more to you than one you have to defeat. You didn't lose a single bullet, and they lost the war inside their own head. That weapon is fear, deception, despair delivered on purpose. And today I'll show you how armies have used it to make entire forces surrender without a fight, and why that exact same weapon is being aimed at your mind right now, off the battlefield, by people you'll never see. Vietnam, the dead of night. A group of enemy soldiers are dug into the jungle, exhausted, far from home, and then out of the blackness they hear it. A voice. Human but wrong, echoing, hollow like it's coming from beyond the grave. It moans that it is dead, that it died far from home and now its soul is trapped, wandering in agony. A child's voice cries out for her father to come home. Funeral music drifts between the trees. To these soldiers, this is not just creepy. It strikes the deepest nerve in their culture. The terror of dying away from home and becoming a lost, restless spirit, doomed to wander forever without a proper burial. The voices in the dark are telling them, this will be you. Go home before it's too late. It was a recording. American forces had built it deliberately, a tape they called by a ghostly number, and they blasted it from helicopters and hidden speakers night after night. To shatter the enemy's will. No bullets, just sound aimed straight at the mind. And in places it worked. Men deserted, abandoned their posts, broke. That is psychological warfare. And it is not a sideshow to real war. It is one of the oldest and most decisive weapons there is. Over the next 20 minutes, I'll show you the 3 forms this weapon takes. The real battles won without firing a shot. And then the part that matters most to you. How this exact weapon left the battlefield and is now pointed at civilians, at you, every single day. Let's start with the secret hiding under all of warfare. Here's the idea that separates great commanders from average ones. Most people think war is about destroying the enemy's body, their soldiers, their tanks, their city. But the sharpest military minds in history understood something deeper. War is really a contest of will. The body is just where the will lives. An army doesn't lose when half its soldiers are gone. It loses the moment the other half decides the fight isn't worth dying for. A nation doesn't fall when its walls are breached. It falls when its people stop believing they can win. Every surrender in history, at its core, is a mental event, a moment where the will to keep fighting finally breaks. Kill the will, and the body lays down its weapons on its own. This is why, thousands of years ago, the most famous military strategist of all time wrote that the supreme achievement is not winning 100 battles, it's defeating the enemy without fighting at all. Break their plans, break their alliances, break their nerve, and they collapse before a single sword is drawn. The bloodiest victory is actually the clumsiest one. The masterpiece is the war the enemy quits before it begins. So if the real target is the will to fight, the morale, the courage, the hope, then the deadliest weapon isn't the one that destroys the most bodies. It's the one that destroys the most will. And that weapon has 3 main forms. The first one is the oldest emotion humanity has, fear. The first weapon is fear, and the masters of it understood a chilling truth. A reputation can conquer a city before the army ever reaches it. Think of the great conquering empires of history, the ones that swept across continents at terrifying speed. A huge part of that speed wasn't superior weapons. It was terror, deliberately manufactured and spread ahead of the army like a shockwave. They would make an example of a city that resisted, and then make absolutely sure the story of that destruction traveled far and wide, growing more horrifying with every retelling. By the time their forces approached the next city, the defenders had already heard the legend, and many of them simply opened the gates. Surrender with the faint hope of mercy felt better than annihilation. The army had won that city without losing a single soldier, using nothing but a story. They went further. They learned to manufacture the appearance of overwhelming force, lighting far more campfires at night than they'd had men, so scouts would report a monstrous army, kicking up dust, making noise, spreading rumors of numbers that didn't exist. The enemy wasn't defeated by the real army. They were defeated by the imaginary one, the bigger, scarier version that lived in their own frightened minds. This is the core mechanic of fear as a weapon. It makes the enemy do your work for you. A terrified mind exaggerates the threat, imagines the worst, and talks itself into giving up. You don't have to actually be unstoppable. You just have to make them believe you are. The fear does the conquering. And notice how cheap it is. A real battle costs lives, time, supplies, and the outcome is never certain. But fear, spread well, can deliver an entire city or army at almost no cost. That's why it's been the favorite weapon of conquerors for as long as there have been wars. The deadliest blow often lands before the fighting starts, in the imagination. The second weapon is deception, making the enemy fight the wrong battle, defend the wrong place, or fear an army that doesn't exist. As that same ancient strategist put it, all warfare is based on deception. The greatest example might be one of the most important days of the 20th century. The Allies were about to launch a massive invasion across the water into occupied Europe. Everything depended on surprise, on the defenders guessing wrong about where the blow would land. So the Allies built an entire fake army. They set up hundreds of inflatable tanks and dummy equipment in plain view, positioned as if a huge force was massing to strike at the most obvious crossing point. They created fake radio traffic, chatter for units that didn't exist, so enemy listeners would hear an army assembling. They even pinned this phantom force under the name of a famous, feared general, knowing the enemy would take any army he led seriously. And they fed false information through a double agent the enemy trusted completely, who was secretly working for the other side. The enemy believed all of it. They became convinced the real invasion would come at that obvious crossing. And so they kept a massive force, around 150,000 soldiers, waiting there to defend against an attack that was never coming. When the true invasion landed somewhere else entirely, those defenders stayed put for crucial days, still guarding against a ghost. An army of rubber and radio static had pinned down a real army of 150,000 men. No bullet fired by those inflatable tanks. They won by making the enemy believe. That's the genius of deception. You don't have to be stronger than your enemy. You just have to control what they think is real. Because every decision they make, every soldier they move, is based not on the truth, but on the picture in their heads. Control the picture, and you control the army. The most dangerous lie in war isn't the one you tell the world. It's the one your enemy tells themselves, because you set it up perfectly. The third weapon is the slowest and, over time, maybe the most powerful: demoralization. Not one terrifying shock, but a steady, patient draining of the enemy's hope, until the will to fight quietly dies. The classic tool is almost absurdly simple: paper. Across the great wars of the last century, armies dropped propaganda leaflets by the billions, not millions, billions, onto enemy troops. And these leaflets weren't random. They were psychological instruments. Some showed a soldier exactly how to surrender safely, with a safe conduct pass he could carry. Some reminded him of the warm home and family waiting for him, planting the question, "Why am I dying here for this?" Some told him his leaders were lying to him, that his side was already losing, that his death would be meaningless. Drip, 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 until fighting felt pointless and going home felt like the only sane choice. Then there was the voice. Armies used radio broadcasts, smooth, friendly voices speaking the enemy's own language, to whisper doubt directly into soldiers' ears. Your wives are lonely. Your leaders are safe while you suffer. You cannot win. Why not just stop? The goal was never to inform. It was to corrode, to make a man feel alone, abandoned, and hopeless, one broadcast at a time. And the most haunting versions, like that ghost tape in the jungle, didn't just argue. They reached past logic entirely and struck at a culture's deepest fears and beliefs. They understood that a frightened, homesick, exhausted human being isn't defeated by an argument. He's defeated by a feeling, by despair. Here's the thread running through all three weapons: fear, deception, and demoralization. None of them attack the body. They all attack the mind, what the enemy is afraid of, what the enemy believes is real, and what the enemy hopes for. Break those three, and the strongest army in the world will lay down its weapons. Which raises a very uncomfortable question, because every one of those three weapons works just as well on people who aren't soldiers at all. Here's the part nobody warns you about. These weapons, fear, deception, demoralization, were perfected to break enemy soldiers, but they don't care whether the target is in uniform. They work on any human mind. And in the modern world, the battlefield has quietly moved off the front lines and into your phone. This is what people now call information warfare. And you are standing right in the middle of it, usually without realizing you're a target. Watch for the same three weapons. Fear, a constant stream of content engineered to keep you afraid of the other side, of the future, of your neighbors, of collapse. Because a frightened population, just like a frightened army, stops thinking clearly, craves a strong protector, and is easy to herd. Deception, a flood of fabricated images, fake accounts, doctored clips, and invented experts, all designed to control the picture of reality in your head, so that you, like that enemy general, make your decisions based on a battlefield that doesn't actually exist. And demoralization, the quietest and most dangerous one, a steady drip of messaging that says your country is hopeless, your vote is pointless, your institutions are all corrupt, nothing can be fixed, so why even try? Sometimes that despair is aimed at you on purpose, because a population that gives up, that turns on itself, that stops believing anything can get better, has already surrendered without a shot, exactly like that soldier dropping his rifle in the dark. So how do you defend your own mind? Same principle the best soldiers use. Protect your morale and verify the battlefield. When a message makes you feel sudden fear, despair, or rage, treat that feeling as a flag. Ask who benefits from you feeling it. Before you spread something alarming, check if it's even real, because the moment you share manufactured fear, you've become an unpaid soldier in someone else's information war. And guard your hope deliberately, because in this kind of war, your despair is the enemy's victory, and your refusal to give up is the one thing they cannot manufacture for you. So remember this: the deadliest weapon in the history of war has never fired a bullet, because it was never aiming at the body. It aims at the will, at what you fear, what you believe, and what you hope for. Break those, and a person surrenders all on their own, convinced it was their own idea. For 3,000 years, that weapon was pointed at soldiers. Today, a version of it is pointed at all of us, through screens, through feeds, through manufactured fear and despair. And the defense is the same as it always was. See the weapon for what it is, and refuse to let your mind be the battlefield. Next time, we go deeper into the scariest version of all. The fear tactic so precise it's designed to make an entire enemy force surrender on their own, before a single battle is ever fought. Subscribe, and let's keep pulling these threads. This is Never Heard About.